Go ahead and kick us off.
I would. Hi, sorry. I had to unmute myself there. Good afternoon. We're so glad to have you. Thanks so much for joining us. We have a really exciting conversation about a really important topic, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Again, if you haven't already, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box, your name, your pronouns. I can already see lots of folks from across the state. So thank you so much for joining us. If you need some help or if you have a little trouble, you can just click the three dots by your name. Or if you're having trouble, just click on participants and then click on rename. All right, so you are joining us for our legislative lunch and learn regarding resources for LGBTQ older adults. And that has to do with the two pieces of legislation that we passed this year to update the Older Americans Act. We're so glad to have Senator Barker and Delegate Adams join us for this conversation as they championed those pieces of legislation for us this year. We do have two more legislative lunch and learns that are coming up. Next week, we'll talk about marriage equality, and in the final session, we'll talk about HIV modernization. So we do hope that you'll be able to join us for these next two Wednesdays. We'll be here 12 to 1. Feel free to check out our website. You can register and learn more about those events on our website. All right. So as you heard, probably this session is being recorded. We do welcome you to turn on your camera if you're comfortable so that everyone can see each other. It feels a little bit more, chummy to be able to see each other's faces, but no need to. We do ask that you stay muted, but please do feel free to engage in the chat box. Feel free to drop in your questions and your comments throughout the session. We'll be tracking those questions, and then our panelists will have a chance to answer them throughout the session. If there are any questions that we don't get to, we will be sure to get the answers to those questions in the recap or follow-up email that we'll send out after the session. And just so you know, Mario is our room monitor, so he's going to be helping keep the session secure for us. If you do have any technical difficulties, just send Mario a direct message and he'll help you out. All right, and that being said, I'm going to let the staff introduce themselves real quick, though I know many of you are familiar with them. I'll pass it over to you, Mario, since I just mentioned your name.
Hi, y'all. My name is Mario Guevara. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Development Operations Coordinator here at EV, and I'm super excited for another wonderful lunch and learn. I'll pass it off to Talia.
Hey, everyone. It's so good to see all of you again. Thank you for showing up today. Really excited for the conversation. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the Program Director at Equality Virginia. Back to you, V.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. We have such a great team, and I do want to shout out our Policy and Communications Coordinator, Andi McAndrew. She is a little under the weather today, so she is not able to join us, but her hard work really helped make this program happen. So we're sending her lots of good energy and good vibes as she's at home resting. All right. So this is how we're going to spend our time together this afternoon. We have flown through the first two bullets. Delegate Adams is going to give us a quick overview before she has to hop off, and then we'll actually dive into the panel where you'll get to meet Senator Barker and our other wonderful panelists from around the state. And then we will share some resources with you, and then we'll wrap up. So again, please feel free to drop your questions and your comments into the chat box, and we will get to those. So what are we here to talk about today? What is this legislation? Again, cannot thank Senator Barker and Delegate Adams enough for championing this legislation. This is the first time that we have actually addressed this issue at the legislature, and we were really grateful to the both of them for ushering this through, for helping to educate the other senators and delegates in the chamber so that we could be the next state in the country to make this really important update. unfortunately, this update was so needed because many LGBTQ older people are actually more likely to be isolated from their family, to experience poorer health, to live below the poverty line. This is unfortunately especially true for Black and Latinx LGBTQ older adults. And we're also seeing a really disturbing trend across the country where LGBTQ elders are actually going back into the closet as they age because they're afraid of being discriminated against, of being mistreated when they enter nursing homes or assisted care facilities or accessing resources like the ones we're going to discuss. And so, we felt really strongly that it was important to have this bill so that LGBTQ elders could have access to resources like Meals on Wheels, for example. So the Older Americans Act is a piece of legislation that has to do with the distribution of a variety of services, from legal resources to transportation and then to nutrition services. And again, the most familiar one to many folks is Meals on Wheels. And so all of these services really help everyone who's aging actually age in their homes. Many older people prefer to age in their homes. It's comfortable, it's familiar, they have community connections, great neighbors. And so aging with, what's called aging in place or aging in their homes is often preferred for folks as they get older. And so these programs that are provided under the Older Americans Act make it easier and safer for folks to age in their homes. And what we know is that many, again, older LGBTQ folks are just not accessing those resources. Again, they're afraid of being turned away. Maybe they're just not aware of those resources, not familiar with them. They don't feel like they can access those resources as easily as their cisgender or heterosexual peers. And so again, it was really important to make sure that LGBTQ elders felt like these resources were available to them so they could age in home more easily and safely. So yay, because of Senator Barker and Delegate Adams, we're now able to do that. And of course, we could not have moved this legislation forward without the support and the voices of many community members, of advocates, of practitioners who work with older folks, especially older LGBTQ folks. So this is the product of a lot of hard work, a lot of advocacy, both public and behind the scenes. So we were really grateful to be moving this forward. And with that, I'm going to pass it actually over to Delegate Adams, who again is unable to join us for the panel, but we really wanted to make sure that we lifted up her voice and her experience as she was one of the bill champions. So Delegate Adams, I was just wondering if you could share with us, why was it important to you to carry this bill? And, what is the impact that you hope this will have across the state?
Well, thanks, Bea. And I am looking down because I'm actually listening to my phone and talking into my computer, so I apologize for that. And I appreciate you describing what the bill does. It is so important, and it is. It turned out to be tremendously personal to me. It's hard not to see who is in the audience, but I think it's so. Probably for younger people, why would we need this bill? Why, it's accepted, it's fine. Why would you need that? And so I was thinking back into my own experience, and people that are in the 65 and older, they were born in the mid 50s. And so I was born a decade later, but up into, till I was 16 or 17 years old, there was zero touch points for being gay, zero. And it was a source of shame. It was a source of something that you needed to definitely hide. And then once I've actually even came to a little more enlightenment, it was because of the AIDS crisis. And so now we had another reason to be full of worry, fear, shame, ridiculed. And as a nurse, a young nurse in 1986, 87, I was not out. In fact, I wasn't out for decades. My only ability to embrace my community really was to provide excellent healthcare to people that didn't get that. Largely, a lot of people did not want to take care of patients with AIDS, and I did that for years. Under the cover of not being out, and it was still like 1993, Philadelphia. The movie Philadelphia came out again about AIDS. Nothing, pride was a thing that I couldn't even wrap my brain around because all I knew was shame. And I don't imagine it was very different for a lot of people prior to that in my generation and earlier, because there just wasn't a societal acceptance. And so many people who are still living gay, went through periods of problems with sobriety, with problems with suicidal ideation, suicide attempts. There was a lot of reasons not to feel anything good or positive for many people. And those kind of things, also when you impact somebody's self-confidence and self-esteem, you impact their ability to go out into the job market and really make it, and make a good living and be all that you can be. That so many young people are so fortunate to have all of this wrap around support for who they are. And it's just wonderful that this has been something that has become just normal or normalized rather than something that has been so difficult. So as you get older, as much as we have changed, right? And I think it was, if you're 23 years old, you haven't known a world without Will and Grace, right? And really, that was like the first time it really became sort of a positive, cool thing. And being gay then has evolved a lot. But if you've been through any other traumas in your life, you know that you don't forget them just because they went away. And so, this whole idea of like how you would be treated, we can change policies, but we have to change hearts and minds, and you have your own experiences. So many people, as they move into their older years, they have all these experiences that they carry with them. And that brings fear, isolation. I don't know that I want to come out. Those kind of things come into play. Now, for me as a healthcare provider, I can tell you, when I was not out, standing in an OR, listening to an attending surgeon, he's an attending now, he was a resident at the time, he said, homophobia, I'm not afraid of gays, I hate them. And I got to hear that because nobody knew I was gay. And so, I have always been acutely aware of this sort of insidious sort of discrimination in the healthcare arena, which is much more pervasive than people think. And so it's been super personal and important to me to get people to understand that this is new. Just like, people might have their minds blown if they knew in the 70s a woman couldn't get a credit card without permission of their husband, right? So, we feel like we're so evolved, but we're just infants in this evolution. And so there are many people who have, not had the benefit of tremendous support, tremendous career growth, tremendous assets, that many people do benefit from now. And they need to be able to feel safe and comfortable as they age. They need to be able to access resources without fear of retribution. And frankly, they needed an agency to be informed and say, hey, you need to look for these people and help them, because maybe they don't even know that they're eligible. And so that's why it's so, for me, it's just something I've seen my entire life. And an evolution in our society doesn't necessarily mean that as people grow older, they feel any safer, because they're carrying history. Some of it's healed, some of it's not. And it's just so important that people know that we do love and care about all of our older people. Aging in place is a passion of mine. And so, especially for people that are trans, LGBTQ, it is so important that people feel like they're humans and they deserve every bit of support that any other human deserves.
Thank you so much. That was so powerful. And I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head about how much trauma that the LGBTQ community has experienced, and what it was like to grow up during the AIDS crisis and what it was like in the 80s. And I was just thinking about how fewer people that we have who are aging, because we lost so many to the epidemic during that time. I do want to be respectful of your time. I know you only have a couple of minutes, and just wanted to say thank you again for championing this. I remember super clearly your testimony in the House committee, where, I mean, I don't know that there was, you know, a person who was not touched by your testimony and how close this issue hit to home. And as we kind of say goodbye to you, I just want to see if there's anything that you'd like to leave us with, or what your hope is for LGBTQ elders as this bill goes into effect next month.
Yeah, well, and I hope it's okay if I sort of hang out, because my meeting that was up canceled, so I'll stay in the background. But you know, honestly, you know, I think that as we lift up all people who are aging, that, you know, I hope that this bill helps make older LGBTQ Virginians feel supported. But more importantly, I hope that that we as a culture will understand how important people are, irrespective of the fact that they get a couple of decades on them.
It's powerful. Thank you. Thank you. And we're actually going to go ahead and open it up to our wonderful panel. I'm going to pass it over to Talia, who will take it from here.
Thank you so much, V, for getting us started, and thank you, Delegate Adams, for that rousing and really powerful testimony about this bill. As we mentioned earlier, we do ask you stay muted during the panel discussion, but we absolutely welcome and invite you to drop your questions in the chat. Our team will be tracking those, and so we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can, so that our panelists can answer them and you can hear from them. So yeah, we'll go ahead and start with introductions. Again, I'm Talia. I'll be facilitating and moderating today, and I'll pass it over to our panelists to start introducing themselves. Starting with Senator Barker, if you'd like to go first.
I'm Senator Barker, and I carried the companion bill in the Senate this year and worked with Delegate Adams on making sure that we got it through both bodies so that it became law, or it's going to become law, I guess, on July 1st. But you know, we're in good, certainly moving forward on things. And I was very proud and pleased to be able to patron the bill in the Senate and to work on a little bit on some education with some people who didn't quite understand why this was something that was an issue initially. And you know, I think, you know, what, you know, sort of my goal with a lot of these types of things is to get to the point where there is such broad support on these types of issues that there's no longer a difference between Democrats and Republicans. Right now, we are making progress on that, and particularly a lot of the younger Republican legislators are much more you know, supportive on these issues than some of the older ones. But we got which actually sort of points to part of the problem that Delegate Adams was talking about, because if you were born, as I was, back in the 1950s, you know, it was a different world then than someone who was born 20 or 30 years later and has had, you know, much more open situation. And so you can see why they might have challenges getting services or wanting to even ask for something and being fearful of sort of what the response is going to be, given what their experiences were earlier in life. And I think, you know, that's part of what we were able to help educate some legislators as well as hopefully some others on this issue this year.
Wonderful.
And I can tell you one other thing, just to show you that this is a sort of a personal experience for both of us. I ran into Delegate Adams in a parking lot just off the Fairfax County Parkway one Sunday afternoon, and she had just seen her mother, who's had some issues and everything, and I was on my way to see my mother-in-law at a retirement community. So, you know, we're sort of dealing with it on that end of things as well, and wanting to make sure that everybody has equal access to services and everybody hopefully can get what they need.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, this really is personal stuff.
Right.
Definitely want to also hear real quick from our other panelists. If you can just tell us your name and pronouns, where you're located, and organizations that you may be representing today, starting with JL.
Good afternoon. My name is J.L. Pressley, and I am the Supreme President for the Alpha Omega Kappa Fraternity Incorporated. We are a trans men fraternity, and my pronouns are he, him, king, and I'm living in Richmond, Virginia. One thing I learned from Thalia, I live on the Powhatan indigenous land.
Thank you for lifting that up, JL. We're so glad to have you with us today. Kathy, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi, I'm Cathy Campbell. I'm a pronoun to she, her, hers. I'm a faculty member at the School of Nursing at UVA, also a board member, the Hospice of the Piedmont. And I just want to give a shout out to Delegate Adams. I too was a baby nurse in 1986 and 87, working in the, the AIDS epidemic, dealing with it personally with a family member who died from HIV, but also just kind of being called to this work, wanting to be sure that compassionate end of life care is available for everyone. And I have always been doing this, working and serving these communities since the beginning of my practice. But what really struck me was I went to presenting at a hospice and palliative care conference in Philadelphia, and they said to us, well, you can take pictures of the people who are speaking, but not the people in the room. And I was like, I mean, just sitting here eating lunch, what could the problem be? And just feeling that concern for safety. And so I've kind of taken that through my work in the past few years, and definitely thinking about safety as a spiritual practice, and wanting to make that safe, compassionate care available for people. So I am glad to be here. Thank you, Thalia, for all the good, how good you take care of us here.
Thank you all for all that you've done, past and present, to strengthen our community and keep us spiritually and physically whole. We appreciate it. Charley, we'd love to hear from you next.
Hey everybody, my name is Charley Burton. I am Program Director for Black Transmen Incorporated. Black Transmen Incorporated is the first national Black trans organization that is primarily for Black trans men. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I probably earned my stripes on this panel. I'm 61 years old, so I am a Black trans elder, and definitely know what it's like going through the ranks of medical care. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and it is a pleasure to be on this panel today.
Thank you, Charley. We're so honored to have you with us. And last but not least, Donna Baker, we'd love to have you go next.
Thank you, Talia. My name's Donna Baker. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am representing the Jefferson Area Board for Aging here in Charlottesville and the surrounding area. I've been with JABA for 10 years now. Prior to that, I was the Client Services Director at the AIDS HIV Services Group for about 7 years, and worked very closely prior to that as an ally in higher ed for LGBT groups. So I'm glad to be here. And for folks in Charlottesville, Charley and Kathy, I hope we can connect after this.
Awesome. I love seeing the connections already forming. That's really exciting. All right. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started with a few questions. And again, folks, as we are talking and as people are answering questions on the panel, please, please, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. We really want this to be an engaging and interactive experience. So thank you for going ahead and starting to think about questions right now. Yeah, we'll get started with our first question. If folks can kind of speak to some of the common experiences of LGBTQ older adults accessing aging services, resources, things like that, that kind of speak to like why this bill is so necessary. And anyone is welcome to jump in.
I'll go ahead and start. Some of the things that I read about and heard, obviously stigma is still prevalent. One of the things I've seen in an area agency on aging, you also have a lot of older people working there. So there is education we have to do internally as well as externally to make sure our services are appropriate. V talked about some of the problems that might accompany this, and we know that LGBT folks are twice as likely to live alone, so they don't always have the access or support to get to services, and they're 4 times as less likely to have kids, which means area agencies on aging can be a very supportive place to be, but we have to make sure that we're doing what we can to reach out to the LGBT community and helping people overcome that stigma and overcoming that fear of acceptance is crucial.
I'd like to add to that, you know, I say our healthcare spaces have not been safe places, safe, welcoming places. People not feeling that they can disclose their gender identity, sexual orientation without it being used as a barrier to be able to access care. And then also certainly in my working in hospice, a lot of that care is provided in people's homes. And so you have this double vulnerability that now we're navigating this end of life care. And now you have someone coming into your home. You may be concerned about not so much that people are going to take your physical things or money or whatever, and that does happen, but you're just not safe there. You cannot be who you are. People are having to remove pictures, and then you're also, when you have to have somebody do your personal care, trying to explain to them why your body may look different. It's just a very vulnerable, tender time. And I think it's important that we educate our healthcare providers about how we care for transgender adults. And it was really I couldn't understand why a profession and a system that I have been proud to be a member of, it's not welcoming to all people. That was really something I had to kind of be with. I just it was really it kind of took my breath away, but it has been an inspiration for me to be a part of this, to make this part of my work.
I want to jump right behind Cathy, because you hit on a couple of things that actually happened to me being a trans man. And not to make it a long story, but one of the things that's really shocking is the very fact that if you are trans and Black, and I'm just going to put it out on the table. There was a car accident where a trans sister who was trans sister of color literally was on the brink of life and death. And the EMT, once, of course, when they started trying to pull her clothes, trying to find out assess the whole thing on the scene. And once they found out that she was male at birth, the care stopped and she died on the streets like a dog. And so that number one put an anger in me, and number two, that put a fear in me. Because prior to my transit, prior to all of my surgeries and everything, going to a hospital here in Richmond, I had an injury, had to get to the hospital. And as soon as I got there, we were trying to slow them down and let them know, when you cut my shirt, this is what you're going to find. And in the emergency room, they stopped services on me. And it brought up that whole fear again. So I think that, the whole the experience of being Black and trans, and people not being educated on how to deal with people as people, it becomes difficult. The second piece of that is, for me, is the very fact that I've had to go through literally 5 doctors in order to find finally a nurse practitioner who understands who I am. He wanted to learn. He's all on board. He's now my number one supporter. But it's just the very fact that I had to go through 5 doctors. I had to go through humiliation in an exam room. The doctor literally walked out, left the door open, went out and told people, hey, he's a girl. That's not professional. That's number one. Number two, it was very much humiliating because people were walking by and now they're peeking, trying to find out what's going on in the room. So getting older now makes me a little more apprehensive. I pray to God that I never have to go to a nursing home. I pray that I can get somebody who understands. And hopefully by that particular point, when I get to that point, I'll have somebody that understands trans issues and, you know, the things that we have to go through. Because like Cathy said, I don't want to have to hide pictures. I don't want to have to tell you, don't go in that drawer, because you might not want to see what you're going to see. But those are the things that sometimes becomes very apprehensive about, you know, becoming older and hopefully not being able to have to go to a nursing home, or if I do go to a nursing home, how am I going to be treated? Because we're grown. I had top surgery, but I'm not going to have bottom surgery. So how are you going to treat me is now becoming my very much defense at this point. And I'm grateful, you know, that everybody's out there and going to the Senate and going to the House to fight for this bill, because it's going to be very much important in the next 5 to 15 years. Because you've got the 60-year-old, the 1960 babies, we're coming up age now. And so that's going to be something that we're really going to have to like put our foot on the pedal and not let up until we know for a fact we're all the way there.
I want to echo, I thank Cathy and JL and Donna, but here's the real deal. You can pass any bill you want, but unless people in the healthcare industries and the nursing home are not trained and trained well, that bill means nothing. It means nothing, because we will still be treated the same way. You know, and training doesn't mean hiring the receptionist or the janitorial staff, or everyone needs to be trained, from the doctors down to them. And it doesn't need to be an hour so that you can check the box and then you're hired. It needs to be continuous training, you know, continuous education. And if these people don't get it, as sad as it sounds, you put them out the door and you bring people in who do. You know, as trans people, we have less of a advantage than the rest of the LGBT community. It's just the way that it is. Our bodies are different, and many people want to look at us as a circus, so they can get their curiosity and get their jolly rocks off on whatever. I've had my hard experience. The emergency room is the most broken system in the healthcare. I will tell you that there are 2 or 3 things that I pray on a daily basis, that I get in my car and now as a Black man and make it safely to where I need to go in the state of Virginia, back where I'm going and back home. You know, and my next prayer is that I treat people the way I would want to be treated. And then my third prayer is, God, please don't let me have a situation where I've got to be faced with an EMT. And then you're going to start cutting clothing off. And then you got to start explaining. And so, you know, being someone who's had elder parents who has went into nursing homes for rehab, the reality is the people who deal with people in the nursing homes are not the nurses and not the doctors on a daily basis, but your CNAs who are making minimum wage FVAC. They're disgruntled, they're angry. We don't know what their home life is like. Most of them are living in really bad situations. They put their scrubs on and they come in and they do their 8 to 10 hours and they're not happy. And so their unhappiness spills over into the patient. And you're right. The majority of trans people many are not together with a partner. And so we're maneuvering these avenues by ourselves. And I am grateful that I have a family and friends that will support me, but that's just me. So what happens to my other brothers and sisters? And we don't even want to go down the line of what Black trans women go through, or trans women of color. And so this bill is fantastic, it's great, but it can pass all day long. But unless we get in here and start getting some training and services in these organizations in this healthcare, we're going to continue to go down this road every year.
Thank you, everyone. That was really powerful. And I really appreciate the vulnerability and the truth telling that everyone brought already. It means so much. And JL, thank you also for sharing the story of your sister. Hope she's resting in peace. And thank you for calling her into this space. We definitely honor her memory. We also had a question in the chat from Deanna. Thank you for Senator Barker. And we will get into in the panel, we'll get into it a little bit more about beyond just passing this bill, like what does this look like moving forward, implementing it, training, things like these questions. But to start with, Senator Barker, how has DARS, the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, been involved in the conversation around the passage for these bills? And Delegate Adams, feel free to jump in here as well.
Well, I've had conversations a little bit with people at DARS at the state level, but particularly with the area agencies on aging in Northern Virginia, in the area where I live. And actually the people with the agencies up here in Northern Virginia were very pleased to have this bill there. They said they've already been doing a lot of these types of things, and this just makes it a lot easier for them to get whatever support they need at the local level to be able to implement things. And they talked about how a lot of the time people might have been able to access the Meals on Wheels and some of those types of things, but they weren't getting the social supports. And I think that's probably the aspect of this bill that will make the biggest difference here, is stressing that we're looking at economic issues for older people, but we also need to deal with their social issues that they have. And you talked earlier about Don talked earlier about the isolation and those types of things. A lot of those types of things are clearly more relevant to those who are now in their 60s and 70s than there will be when some of the younger people get to those ages. But it's critical to make sure that we have everything moving forward at the right time here. The law will technically go into effect on July 1. There's already awareness among the area agencies on aging of the law and of the bills that Delegate Adams and I were able to get passed this year. And I don't know how much training there's been on a lot of these things. We're still sort of easing back into more in-person types of things at the state level. So we are, I think we're headed in the right direction, and we'll be able to provide training on this and other types of things during the next year or so. One of the things that actually has been a little bit of a challenge is that aging services were moved to DARS about a decade ago, about 10 years ago, was moved in that direction. That has not been a match that has worked as well as some people were hoping it would. There are those people who are on the disability side and those people who are on the aging side, and they're not really coordinated together that well. So we're looking, that's one of the issues, is sort of look, do we keep it within that one agency for the aging and the rehabilitative services and for the disability community, or do we break aging out as its own component, particularly considering that we are an aging population and a higher percentage of our people are going to continue to be over 65 or over 75 or 95, as my mother-in-law is now. So there are things like that we could do, or it could be, some of the services, most of the services came from things related to the Department of Social Services previously, and we may, sort of reconnect those two entities there. And this will be a test to sort of see how well the agency responds at the state level on implementing things and making a very positive thing right off the bat.
Is it okay if I jump in here?
Certainly.
Yeah, so, I think a couple of things. One, state agencies are made up of people are made up of different belief systems, and belief systems don't always align with the policy, right? Which is why this policy is super important, because people have to follow the guidelines of our law and our regulations and our policies. Secondly, having worked in the state government agency, what I can tell you is that the human body is a complex, entity in and of itself, right? We're mind, body, spirit, and we as an individual live on a continuum of age, right? the way state government works is it's all isolated into these segmental components where the currency is knowledge, right? And so it is a very sick entity in the sense of it's unwell. So DARS actually is not an optimal place at all for aging because it's the trajectory of a human. But when you look at what we've done with other agencies, we've dissected the head from the rest of the human being by having like the Department of Behavioral Health, which we is separate from the health department. And so what we don't have is actually an agency that represents the whole human over the course of a lifespan, other than the Department of Health. And the Department of Health is such a huge responsibility, as we can see through the pandemic, where it has public health, but separately, we should be looking at the real difference between public health and issues around pandemics and epidemiology and water safety and things like that, and then the human being as living over the course of a lifespan, from maternal, infant, child health, mortality, and those types of issues, all the way through, to where we age, so that we can actually look at a system as a whole. And so this is a very complicated issue, and it's a super important issue. But I agree with the senator that it is probably time to rethink and reimagine how we're coming at this from an agency level in terms of caring for the human experience over the course of a lifetime. So it's super interesting from I'm a policy wonk, and I like thinking about these things, but as a human, we've got to do this quickly, because what we do know is by 2030 we'll have doubled our population of older people over 65 from 2010, and we are very ill prepared for the trajectory that's ahead of us. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we can use everybody's help, but I think this policy is helpful. It is certainly not the answer. We have so much more to do, but if we don't have policies like this in place, we're not beginning to chip away at many of these larger issues, which in government, because of bureaucracy, and bureaucracy is strangely important, we have to chip away sometimes at some of these problems.
Thank you so much for that context, and also just kind of sharing some of your own thoughts on next steps and things like that. It's really helpful to, I think, set this conversation. I also want to kick it off to Donna real quick to kind of speak to some of the more local stuff that's going to happen with what we just heard about. So like, how will area agencies on aging, the AAAs, I guess you could call them, ensure that LGBTQ older adults are able to meet their needs, and all older adults in general?
I'd love to speak for all AAAs. I can't, I'm most familiar with what we do. What I would recommend for each AAA, there's been a lot of conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a lot of that is focused on race, and we have to have a broader conversation. One of the things we've been doing at JABA in Charlottesville, we've done some training with staff over the past couple of years to ensure that our staff reach a certain level of cultural competency. We've started looking at our forms. Are we giving people the opportunity to express their pronouns? Are we giving them an opportunity to identify their gender appropriately? And I think any social service agency is going to have to be looking at that, so when people are walking in the door, that there is a certain comfort level. Are there visible allies, that people can reach out to? Are the programs that we provide culturally sensitive? Is there something that meets people's interest? And we struggle. We struggle with that on a daily basis, because not everybody walking in the door wants to play bingo. But we are trying to provide quite a variety. One of the things that there were several people who identified as Unitarian Universalists, so they'll understand the terminology about what it means to be welcoming. That was terminology that the U used. use to create a welcoming congregation. And I use some of that terminology in our agency. You know, what does it truly mean to be welcoming to everybody, but specifically welcoming to LGBT seniors? I think all of us, we need to hold staff accountable for the work that we do. You know, I'm appalled by the situations that JL and Charley have found themselves in, but our local ombudsman shared with me a very similar situation with a trans person in a local long-term care community, you know, here in Charlottesville, about being not being respected in using appropriate pronouns, and staff being emotionally abusive and not being a good role model for other residents, and the residents piling in on that. The thing that we have to do in working with our ombudsman program is make sure we have staff who are strong, who are good role models, who are willing to take on these issues as they occur. And, you know, I hope people do understand that the ombudsman program is there for folks in the long-term care communities. And these are issues that they deal with on a regular basis. In addition to training and educating staff, we have to educate our clients. We have to educate, you know, people have talked about the older generation and the mindset that they come in with, and we have to work with them just as closely as we have to work with staff and hold people accountable for what they say and do. There is a lot of work to do. Lorianne said that in the chat in the chat box. And I feel in a lot of ways that the area agencies on aging are just starting that process with LGBT issues. I think some of us do it better than others. And some of us are in population centers where we can actually provide a congregate program specifically to an LGBT audience. I'd love to do that here if that's what's needed. We're not there yet.
Well, if I might jump back in here and picking up on what Donna was saying and what Delegate Adams had said earlier on things, policy is important, but just as important, if not in many instances more important, is who the people are and who are the leaders who are going to step forward to deal with things, and who are the people that can model how you work these types of things. I have a constituent of mine who I worked with long before I got elected to the Senate, and I've continued working with him on a number of things. And he's gay, and he worked for the Fairfax County Office on Aging, and so he was basically being able to sort of, while he was working there, deal with a lot of these types of issues in terms of modeling for and talking with other staff people, but also with the elderly people themselves on a lot of these types of things. He's retired now, so now he's actually on the Commission on Aging in a different jurisdiction where he lives in Northern Virginia. So he's sort of continuing to do that type of thing. And when you have those types of, and he's obviously a very outgoing, very dynamic individual. So people like him make a difference in terms of how people see someone who is gay and who's working on some of these issues.
Yeah, thank you for sharing some of that local perspective and implementation. It's clear that, there's definitely a lot of work to be done, and that this is kind of, in some ways, the beginning of a conversation that's been bubbling up for a long time. So I'm glad that we're really kicking this off powerfully and publicly. Oh, it looks like Delegate Adams just left us, but that's okay.
She said she had to go.
Okay, great. No worries. So we had another question in the chat that I want to lift up from Sam. Will further supports be created to manage private care facilities, as well as increasing access within rural communities? And I'll leave that open to folks how they want to answer that.
I think some of this supports, I just want to reference back to the ombudsman program. And if you're not familiar with that, the statewide long-term care ombudsmen are highly trained individuals whose responsibility is to go into long-term care facilities, assisted living, nursing home. It's actually broadened now that there's a bigger emphasis on home and community-based services. It's been broadened to home care. So if I can put in a plug to Senator Barker to increase the budget for long-term care ombudsman, we could do a better job getting into the long-term care facilities. But those are the people who've been highly trained to help resolve issues, and they also work with local community members or community organizations to help bring some of the training and resources to people who are in long-term care. But they are woefully underfunded at the state level. Regarding the increasing access within rural communities, that's a tough one. It's tough because in 4 of our 6 jurisdictions that we serve are considered rural. Louisa, Fluvanna, Nelson, and Greene, and many of those we're still fighting racial issues or coming up against racial issues, and the LGBTQ concerns are so far out there for some folks that it's hard. And all I can say on our behalf is we keep plugging away at it. It's not the answer that everybody wants to hear, but that's what we can do right now.
Well, just to jump in on your challenge there, Donna, that was a good one. Actually, I am on the Finance Committee, sort of vice chair of the Finance and Appropriations Committee in the Senate. And it was either 2018 or 2019, I got about a 40% increase in funding for the Ombudsman program. So it's we at least took a first big step in direction of getting it adequately funded. And people are already, the people that I worked with, including the constituent I talked about earlier, who's on the Commission on Aging in one of the jurisdictions, they are, they're basically, they want to get up to sort of the national goal is to, at a certain level, to increase the funding so that we have the ratio of ombudsmen to individuals who are in long-term care facilities is more appropriate. So, and actually it's one of the things that we should be able to do, because right now we're actually in a pretty good position at the state level in terms of funds. This fiscal year, which ends the end of this month, we actually are going to be have about 15% more in revenue than what we had last fiscal year. And nearly everybody, when we had a meeting back last July, I think pretty much everybody except for me thought our revenues were going to be going down. But we're actually up 15%, which is a huge increase at the state level in 1 year. So we'll be doing a special session before this summer in July or August. We'll go back down and deal with the surplus we have there, as well as the federal money we're getting from the legislation that was passed in Congress in March. So we will be able to start to deal with more of these types of issues where we have been laggard. One of the other ones that I've been pushing on is getting better funding for people who are in assisted living facilities. Our funding for people in nursing homes is not the greatest, but at least we're not the worst either. And we actually have pretty good nursing home providers overall, partly as a result of that. But in assisted living right now, the people who do not have adequate income to be able to afford to pay out of pocket for it. And let me tell you, my mother-in-law is in an assisted living facility, and it costs a lot there for the services that she is receiving. But for the people who can't afford it, the amount that we pay at the state level as of this month is only about between 25 and 30% of what it costs. So with that being the level, what's happening now is many facilities there are saying we can no longer, take care of people, when we're only getting paid 20, quarter of what it costs us to provide the services. And so what's happening is more and more facilities are dropping out. Even some of the ones who were down to, 2 or 3 or 4 people they're saying we can't even continue to take care of those. So we did get a sizable increase in that one that I initiated just this past legislative session that will take effect in July. So we're at least heading in the right direction on some of these types of things, but we still have a long ways to go, and we're going to push hard on it. And we do have a major study going on within the Joint Commission on Healthcare, which I'm vice chair of, and that we're dealing with basically with nursing home right now, and we're going to be gradually expanding into looking at assisted living and other types of services that a lot of elderly people need. So keep reminding us that it's our job to get this done. So that'll help with some of my colleagues, and I think we'll actually be in pretty good shape in a couple of years. So
awesome. Thank you for that context. I also want to circle back before we end to some of our other advocates, Charley, Cathy, and JL. If you have anything you'd like to leave us in closing, especially as it comes to how we see trans people and LGBTQ people thriving as they age.
The possibility for what constitutes community looking a little bit differently. Certainly we had a transgender think tank in March, and one of the themes that came up was how do we connect the generations? How do we connect younger trans identified people with older transgender adults, and how might we have some building of community connection across generations? Certainly, how are we going to use our technology to build community? But at the heart of it is, just how do we connect as people in a deeper way, and have that responsibility to take care of our community.
Actually, Cathy, you hit it right on the head, is how do we connect as people? And that's the whole thing, because at the end of the day, when you take the label and the title off of it, is how do we connect just as people, period? Because if I cut you, you're going to bleed. You cut me, I'm going to bleed. At the end of the day, both of us have to get out of the bed 1 foot at a time. So my biggest thing that I want to really put out that everybody can understand, and I really hope everyone hear my heart and my passion behind it. When it comes to trans issues, we've got to be able to go beyond what's inside of the box. We got to get out of as most people know I'm a PK, so preacher's kid. So there's a story in the Bible where Jesus tells Peter to get out of the boat. And, Peter was, giving this whole thing of, oh, if it's you, bid me come. Okay, it's me, come here. So what I'm saying to our community is, we are here. Get out of the boat and stop thinking inside of this little box, because trans issues, we've got a long way to go. We've come a long way, but we still got a long way to go. And when it comes to, like I said, when it comes down to the 1950s, 60s, and 70s adults now, we're getting to our older age, we've got to put our foot to that pedal. And I continuously say that all the time when it comes to trans issues. We cannot let up off of these issues. We think that we pass a bill and, oh, okay, everything is great, but it's not. Because then we'll look back 20 years from now, and I'll still be fighting the same issue for somebody who's behind me, and I'll be in my 70s and 80s. We can't do that. We've got to go beyond just what we're thinking here. And I also just want to plug this in there as well. When it comes down time to healthcare, each one has to teach one. That's really the type of thing we've got going on here. We can't just have one advocate in a hospital or one advocate in, and I understand, that'll probably just be the opening door, yes. But we've got to get to the point where we sit down and have these hard conversations, because hard conversations do not necessarily have to be hostile, but they have to be hard, and we have to have them. We've got to go beyond the color line as well. And that's going to be the next hard piece. So we've got some conversations that's got to be had. And I'm hoping, with the push that we're doing here, the push that Equality Virginia does, that this will definitely start to open up everyone's eyes and understand that there are more issues here that we have to deal with, but we've got to take it one bite at a time, but we've got to stay on it. We cannot let off of this, because I do not want to be 75 years old and having to live in my home in fear for someone coming to take care of me, because that's the reason why, and I'll say this and I'll be honest about it, that's the reason why I don't have a nurse to come here and help me now. I have a physical disability. I can take care of myself, but there's some days I cannot. But I don't have anybody, I don't want to have a nurse come in and take care of me because of the very fact of being fearful of being stigmatized, being, marginalized, and the whole, and I just don't want, I'd rather suffer the pain than to have somebody come in and help me take a bath. And that's just my truth. And so that's a conversation that we've got to have, and we've got to push it until we make sure that we're heard. And I'm not going out to do no rioting and looting and protesting and all. I'm not doing all of that. I'm just going to keep lifting my voice until it's heard, to understand that Black trans men and women, people of color, trans people, period, people have issues. And we've got to be able to understand what is the issue, how do we do it, what is the resolution, and let's keep moving forward. That's all.
So we've got a table, and we've got legislature, and we've got people now that are recognizing what we need. And so the table has been set. And as an activist, as a person who is out here fighting for the good for people of color and people in the trans community, it is my duty that if you've put this on the table for me to be able to take this back to my people and say, give us some time, but help is on the way. And I feel for JL. I'm not, thank goodness my health is good. But what happens when it doesn't? And so I'm hoping that this bill, and by, if there's any good thing that has come of COVID, it's these type of platforms that we've been able to create so that we connect with people. I'm right here in Charlottesville. I would have never connected with Donna if it had not been for this forum today. And so this is the important thing that we all need to do. We just don't get off the Zoom call and say, that's a great Zoom call, and jump back on the next one. We take the information that we have, we sit down and we start networking with people, and we start creating a safe environment for all LGBTQ people in the state of Virginia. We've got to do something. We've got to do something. For the majority of you, you can get up and go to the doctor, and you're not sitting in the parking lot thinking, such as I did a few weeks ago, when the reality is I have to go to OBGYN. That's my life. And to sit in the parking lot and arrive there 15, 20 minutes early with sweat and anxiety, thinking, hey, who's going to see me going into this door? Who's in the waiting room waiting, who might recognize me? Once I get through the waiting room and checked in the back, I feel a little bit more safer because the nursing staff has had some training and they're okay, and the doctor's fantastic. But then when it's time to jump off the gurney and put the shoes and the clothes back on, then the panic starts again, because now I've got to go back out into the waiting room. And so these are the things as an older, these younger people, it might not even affect them right now. They might even think about it. But for me, as this older guy, these are the things that I have to think about. I should not have to go through anxiety going into a doctor's office and coming out of a doctor's office. And I damn sure shouldn't have anxiety thinking that if I pass out and need medical attention, what is it going to be like? And so the table has been set. Mr. Barker, you are working for these causes, and I appreciate that. And now it is my duty to be able to take part of that torch that you're lighting and take it back to my people and say, the state of Virginia is working on this, and Equality Virginia is behind our back.
Thank you, y'all. That was really powerful. And again, just very, very grateful for the energy and the dedication that you bring, not only to today's discussion, but to this issue at large. I mean, there's decades of experience on this panel, and it shows that, you know, we're not as far as we'd like to be. We're not as even close, but in a lot of ways, we have y'all to thank for the work that is here right now and for making it possible to get through this legislation with the support of our legislators and advocates and folks on the ground implementing these things. So thank you so, so much for joining us today. I know I learned a lot. I always learn a lot from all of you. So thank you so much for being here. Can we give a quick little round of applause for our panelists? Really appreciate all of you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Awesome. All right, I'll pop it over to you real quick, just to end us out.
Sure thing. I just want to echo my gratitude. Such an amazing panel. Thanks, Talia, for facilitating that conversation. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around. I know we went a lot longer than we typically do for these, but that is kind of the joy of having such a robust group of panelists that, you know, we want to make sure everybody's voices get heard and everybody's perspectives get shared. Thanks for being so interactive in the chat box as well. And thanks to this amazing team. Thanks, Talia and Mario and Andi, for all of your hard work that made this program possible. Please be on the lookout. We're going to send a wrap-up email so that you've got all the information. Lots of great resources were shared in the chat, and that will be on its way shortly, within the next few days or so. And so before folks end up hopping off, because I know we're running a little late, we will go ahead and take a group picture like we always do. So if you're comfortable, please feel free to